You can hear us okay? Good. And I may need to leave if anybody else comes to the door. Got that covered this time.
The secretary, Althea, said she's not coming. So I won't be able to help or assist with the note taking because I'll be busy in the next week. So if anybody else has notes and they could just give anything extra to her if she has questions, I won't be answering the email quite as much this week. Guess what time is it?
3:40.
And I did put in here, if it's possible, if we could do the member reports after we get to the point where we finalize the report for the Board of Education, just because I'm not sure if we'll have enough time, and if we don't, then we do need a July meeting. So I wanted to prioritize that.
Yes.
So, oh, did you get copies of everything?
Oh, I did not. This is great.
Okay, we can introduce ourselves. So just so everybody knows who everybody is, I'm Jen, representing CUHE. This is our new department rep, Tim. Amanda is the co-chair along with myself. April Villani is the second representative for CUHE. Then there's Mike Koski representing principals, right? And the senator, Ruth Ward.
Oh, I represent everybody.
Okay, and if everybody has a copy of the April minutes, they could take a look at that.
Okay. Yeah, I hope it's successful this time.
Jen, before any motions are made on the minutes, do we have any of our members joining us remotely?
Yes, we have one.
Well,
Is she a member?
no, she's a member of the public.
Oh, okay.
She's very knowledgeable though.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to make a motion that we accept the minutes from April 21, 2022 as presented.
Second that motion.
I have to abstain, I wasn't here.
I'm in favor.
In favor?
I'm not going to give a full report now. I already mentioned that we need to finalize the annual report before we leave. And if everyone can just check the expiry date on their HEAC term to make sure all the paperwork is completed.
Yeah, I only had two based on this. Cordelli goes to 2022, but I didn't know if that was
I think,
when in 2022. Is it the end of the
Yeah,
calendar year? Is
I
it
don't know, but I think
So I-
it was his term.
concurrent with his term? Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Senator Ward, again, 2022. is the expiration date.
Hopefully she voted in, remain on the council.
But everybody else is 2023 or 24. Should be all set.
Is there anything very pressing someone has to say before we go on to the old business? I'm just addressing the old business because it has to go into the report.
Just if we're going to address the member list, I noticed that Shireen is still listed on the member list that was published on February 7th.
That's true. It's up
So
on
is
the
that something that we could get updated?
Yes, I'll be doing. that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Tim.
I have a number of updates to make in that regard.
So then if we can go back to the old business of equal application of requirements and rights to everyone notifying to home educate under RSA 193A. This is the conversation that we've been having ongoing for over a year. So let me see. So it's referenced a lot in the minutes from last time, as everybody's seen that. So last time we brought up the question, somebody had of Brenda, and they were wondering, do they need to keep a portfolio and do testing because they're part of a full program? And we made the motion, we said, well, yes, you do, because you've notified under 193A. So then we were discussing, and all year and last week we were discussing, well, what falls under the definition of home education as 193A? So I'd like to make a motion. So if the way I understand this, if I make the motion, then we can discuss it. It's not that the motion passes, but a motion to discuss something here. How do I do that?
Do we need a motion and a second in order to
Yes.
discuss it?
Yes.
Okay. I think it's worth it for discussion's sake.
Okay,
personally.
then I'll make the motion to discuss this and you can second it.
Yep.
I wrote up some wording, but it's just some wording so that everybody can look at it and they can edit it and whatever they feel.
Tim, second.
Yes.
You
I'll
second?
second, yeah.
It's the second part. I wrote a potential wording for the two motion or in the what would go into the final report if this is what we come to or edit it or whatever.
Thank you.
So this is my proposal. Looking at the question of why is a homeschooler concerned about what falls under 193A? Amanda made the point last time that we're not against educational choice. And I think it was Heather that said, well, this is not public school, and she was concerned about that. Well, we're actually focused on home education. So what I'm trying to make clear, and I talked to my board about the CUHE board, what is it that we really like about 193A? What's important to us? So I used from that discussion, what's important. So I said, whereas New Hampshire home education law 193A guarantees the following freedoms to home education families in New Hampshire. One, parents can choose their child's curriculum, which does not need to be aligned with state standards. Parents have multiple choices for annual assessment, which need not be standardized testing and does not need to be New Hampshire state assessments. Parents are not required to submit any testing or assessment data to any department or agency of the state. Parents have multiple choices for homeschool notification, participating agencies, including a New Hampshire non-public school. So that's one of the choices. Therefore, the council recommends that any educational program, whether New Hampshire charter school, program created by federal contract or money, or other program of the state of New Hampshire which does not allow for these freedoms, should not fall under RSA 193A home education law. Rather, such programs should fall under another option to fulfill RSA 193A compulsory attendance law. So I mean, what I'm saying is, this is what we're concerned about. And is it being allowed for these freedoms? Best case, what traditionally we've thought is, well, that if it doesn't, it should be under something else. But if you want to use it, take a look at the freedoms.
Yeah, I guess I wouldn't agree. I mean, I don't the freedom is the parent choosing. That's the primary one, right? So if they want to choose a Prendapod, that's home education. It doesn't, the funding isn't called out in state law or the, if I'm a parent and I want to, for example, say I want my kid to learn Common Core. My
Yeah.
choice as a
You
parent,
have the
I have the
choice.
right? So isn't that covered by the existing law? That the parent can choose a Prendapod and knowing what a Prendapod is? And if
Well,
they don't want to have a state assessment at the end, like Prendapods require, they
Well-
would simply not choose a Prendapod?
it does, well, there's a couple of things there. Does the Prendapod actually require the state assessment as it says on the website, or does it not? And if it doesn't, is the parent aware that they can choose not to?
Yeah,
And-
I agree. I mean, a parent must be aware of what they're getting into.
Yeah,
Right.
the other thing, most home educators, when they choose to home educate under 193A, they've looked at their options and say, I want to do this. Whereas in this case, the department is actually saying, in order to take part in this program, you have to notify as 193A. Now,
Right.
I don't know all the details legally, what you can do, what you can't, what's in place. But what's been the concern is if you have a situation where you have somebody notifying as 193A home education, and you force them to do this, and then you say, well, you have to take this test, or you can only notify this person, then you have a subset of homeschoolers who don't have all the freedoms in the law. So it's a precedent.
But they've chosen that. Correct.
Well,
I mean, they don't have to go to a Prendapod.
if you,
I mean, I'm playing devil's advocate, right? So same thing with VLAX, right? If you want to choose to go to VLAX and not enroll full-time as a student, at which point you would be a public school student in a public charter school. But
right,
if you want to use their curriculum to guide your children's education,
yeah, you could sit at home.
right?
Well, a parent can have a choice and put their child into a public school physically.
Yeah.
Or they could home educate and they could say, I want to take all the books home from the public school and sit and do that. And I could also choose to take the public school testing.
Right.
You could, but if you don't have the freedom to choose otherwise,
That's what I'm missing. This is why do they not have the freedom of, they made the choice, correct?
can you go?
I didn't, yeah, am I missing? What am I
Well, I
missing?
mean, what I like about this is giving the reasons, but at the end of the day, I think it, it sums up, I don't think we can say it any louder. We absolutely support, especially as home educators, for parents to make the best choice
Yeah.
for their children, whether that be home education, public education, private education, some other educational opportunity. And we are here as home educators, standing on the shoulders of those people who were before us to make sure our kids have the freedom and we have the freedom to do that. And it's very hard. We don't want to let that go. And the more people we push in that bucket that may not actually be homeschoolers, we as homeschoolers could really lose some of the freedoms that we have. And I think what we're actually asking for would be appropriate is explore the opportunity. Like, I think it's worthwhile a conversation, thought,
Mhm.
what opportunities would there be available to amend our state laws to provide for other opportunities instead of just keep squashing them into home education.
Mhm.
And that seems appropriate to what has been discussed in HEAC, right? Let's explore what those other buckets are that may be created.
Yeah, I don't know all the remedies that the commissioner has,
Yeah.
if there is another bucket. Or perhaps if you're doing Prenda, maybe say, well, because of the home education law, because you've notified, it's up to you if you want to take this test or not. If they notified under something else, then maybe they need to.
Right.
It's just,
And I think a part of that, if that bucket should come to exist in the future, there's going to be that educational piece. For example, I talked to a parent whose child was in a situation that the child was not safe at school. She didn't know what else to do. So she just pulled out of her back pocket to get the school off of her back to notify as 193A, even though her intention is fully to go back in the fall. Is that really truly reflective of what homeschooling is? you know,
It's a legal use of the law
right,
Oh, right.
for the best
Right.
interest of the child.
right.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of it is really protecting that home education status while not necessarily wanting to push other educational opportunities aside,
Mhm.
but we're here as HEAC for home education.
Right.
Right, and I guess that's where everybody has a different definition of home education,
Yeah.
how they want to implement it.
Yeah.
And that's where I look at it, and I look at all my resources as a parent and say, Aprendipod is a resource. If I'm a home educating parent, that's a resource. Yes, it's federally funded. It follows state curriculum and has a state assessment. But as a parent, if that's my choice for my child, I personally would still consider that to be home education. It doesn't, and others may disagree, is that home education because I'm not doing it the way they are choosing to do it for their child. I look at it as your first point here is parents choose. That's how I look at it. I just see Prenda as another resource or VLAX or any of the other multiple resources available home education, whether it's federally funded or
See,
follow
that-
some state guideline.
That's
I
the
don't
key
see
difference
that.
is
but-
whether is it funded by taxpayers? Is it a federal grant
Mhm.
program? That is the differentiation that why we're using the words unfunded homeschoolers as of
Mhm.
late to differentiate between the EFA educational pathway and traditional homeschoolers.
But why
Because-
is that, I guess, because I don't see that in our homeschool law. That funding isn't mentioned as far as I can see in our homeschool law. So how do we attach funding to the definition if it's not in the current law?
Because traditional homeschooling is unfunded.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so these alternate educational pathways, which are funded, is not considered traditional homeschooling under RSA 193A by homeschoolers.
Right, that's their opinion under their personal opinion based on tradition. I mean, again, it's not in the law, is what I'm pointing to.
If you
And
do,
isn't it a benefit to homeschool families to have some federal support for homeschooling?
but that's a contentious
No.
point.
No?
Some people
Absolutely not.
I think it depends on the
Wow.
family.
Sure.
I mean, government
Yeah.
gunning money comes with strings and requirements
Yeah.
because you want to see, if you're passing around public money, you want to show what your public money is getting for you.
Right.
And some families may opt out of that. In
So
fact,
even like the
many
year,
may.
the year scholarship is federally funded, the camp programs are federally funded, and homeschool parents don't take advantage of that. or-
I don't have information to that information if they
Just
take
curious,
access or
yeah.
not, but I personally know many who would intentionally stay away from publicly funded programs
Okay.
because of the
So we-
strings that may be attached.
I'll be right back.
Wow, so I'll wait for him to come back, but this is,
Well, what I put in here didn't mention funding. Just to point that out.
You have to speak a little louder for all of us to hear you.
I'll say it when he comes back.
Okay.
we're just waiting on the door. Someone's at the door. Just hold on.
Yeah.
Why did all of a sudden get quiet?
That was great to post the number at the door. So if someone wanted to gain access, the public
I
can.
didn't realize I was standing there trying to figure out how I was going to get in. Fortunately, somebody came out and I just said, thank you.
Yeah.
But I didn't know that was another.
Somebody let me in too. I didn't know there was.
No, great. So this is all helpful for me as I'm
Hmm.
trying to understand my clients, if you will, as I work in this position. So
But I
great discussion.
This
think-
is Heather representing.
Hi.
Sorry
Sorry about that. Oh, nope, I'll grab them all. Thank you. Okay.
Just to catch you up, we've already approved the last minutes. We
Perfect.
said hi, we said to check your term, and we made a motion to continue to discuss the issue of what is home education and what is not, sort of that continuing
Yeah.
trend of VLAX thing, and I had written something up. So this is what we're discussing, nothing passed, it was not a motion to the second.
Yeah.
So we're just discussing that right now. And he brought up is there an issue between funded and unfunded? I just wanted to point out that in what I wrote here, I didn't actually mention funded or unfunded at all. I mentioned what freedoms are in the current law that we were concerned about preserving.
And if I could comment, I think Tim's point is valid in that a parent may choose to participate in Apprenda or some other federally funded or any, I mean, it's their choice.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem to me to be too different from participating in the band at your local public school and using the instruments that the school owns, or joining the football team and using the equipment. It's already, taxpayer funded, not necessarily federal, but it's funded. Supplies are taking a biology class at the school. And it's just, just a choice that the parent makes. I don't think the Prenda pods are supposed to be an all-encompassing education, right?
Yeah, I believe they are.
They are?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
also says on the website, and I'm not clear about this, but it says you need to take the state test. Now, whether you
Yeah, I
I
actually,
believe you do, yeah.
you do,
Right. And so that would be kind of akin to enrolling full-time at VLAX.
right, which is actually, well, Heather had said that she didn't think that Prenda was public school, whereas by legal definition, VLAX is a
Right.
public
Yeah,
charter
it's a
school.
public
Yes,
charter.
yeah,
right.
yes, sir.
Okay.
And my concern with Prenda is it's likely temporary because of the federal funding.
Sure, yeah.
But a family could choose that, right?
Yes.
To do their stuff, but we're not saying that by definition is home education.
Right.
And I think it's important that we not just name a program, because another program names something else that's
Right.
almost the
Right.
same thing could crop up. We're living in a really exciting time right now
Yeah.
for families and students, you know.
Yeah, so what I had said is, I mean, from the home education point of view, the best thing, if we preserve this, that our view is, okay, if there's another option or another bucket other than home education, put that in. But I don't know, and this is a recommendation, I don't know what all the laws are.
Mm.
Our concern is that the freedoms within home education law be preserved. So, okay, for some reason, Prenda's in this bucket, then take a look at it. Are you making them take the state tests? Maybe you could waive that because they've notified under 193A. You said they had to notify under 193A in order to participate. I mean, from my point of view, the best thing would be another bucket. You just do your thing.
Right, but if they're gonna be inside the bucket of RSA 193A, then they must be able to enjoy the
The
same
freedoms.
freedoms that are listed here.
I like your approach to defining it.
Yes, they must be able to enjoy the same.
Otherwise, then you have a precedent where you have this subset of people who are told you have to notify who don't have all the freedoms, and that's a concern for us,
Even though they chose. that
even though
path.
they chose that.
So let me just play this out for a minute. So let's imagine a family, right? So that was originally created, right, during the end, in the pandemic.
Yeah.
That's what they were doing,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And it was a cool idea. And then there may be families that are like, you know what, I want to make a pod and we're gonna do home education, or me and my neighbors or whoever, we're gonna use that curriculum. So in that spirit, could they use that curriculum but not be bound, like, so to have these protections? See, I think it was designed as like schools could do it, community people could do it, because at the time, there were people who were literally stopped working and took other parents' kids and ran basically home school programs for those kids, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's the need or where it came about. And so what's interesting here is, in one respect, it's in another bucket already. And then I guess for me, if a family chose to do it, why would they be bound by all the other rules around Prenda? They just wanted to use the curriculum.
They can use any curriculum that they want,
Right.
but if they're in front of, they are in the 193A bucket because the department is saying you must notify under 193A to be eligible.
Because
Well, they
they're-
have, that's what I'm saying.
yeah.
They would have to do that part.
They're neither a
Right.
private, non-public
Right.
school or a
Right.
public school, so they default to home education. You're saying let's add a fourth bucket. right?
Or maybe there
So-
is one, like, I think the law says something about alternate. I don't understand how that works.
Right, right.
Well, see, I'm saying that it could really be in the bucket, because if you say to a school district or to the state, hey, I'm gonna do home education, and then you go choose Brenda, why can't you choose that and not? Because I thought with the Brenda piece, they do have to take exams and all that other, right? Isn't there some
Correct, yeah.
criteria?
All federal programs, right, they want to make
Yeah.
sure the money's being
Mhm.
spent, or they're not going to do it again.
So I
kind of
guess
thing.
for
So it
those
makes
home
sense, yeah.
education parents, they understand that they're making the decision if they choose that pathway, that it is an alternate versus a purely home education model.
Or to the point that was just made, they also have the rights under 193A to refuse those assessments.
Yeah, they just choose something else.
So that's interesting.
Yeah, well, that's what I was saying. In the first
Mhm.
version of it, they could choose not to do that. In the second, though, if it is a federally funded program, by the nature of choosing it, you're committing to whatever that thing is saying.
Right.
Or do you
Right,
write a
that's
letter
what-
saying, because I'm home educating under 193A, I have these rights and I will not comply
Well, I think
to X, Y, and Z?
I don't know that law.
Yeah, I don't know.
This is why it doesn't fit.
Yeah, that's
This
the
is the
thing.
concern.
I mean, the concern is to preserve the freedoms. I mean, it's a recommendation, it's look at it.
put it there?
Because it's
know?
not a.
Because it doesn't
for
fall under
compulsory
charter. or
attendance,
private,
It doesn't fall under.
It's not
non-
charter.
It's not a non-public school, it's not a public school, so the third option is, the parents are making the choice to send their children.
Right.
there. They should-
Go
And I-
under a new
So that's.
option.
Right.
So,
But at this
yeah, maybe it has to be under-
Educational innovation pathway.
Well,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
what
yeah.
it- There you go. Because honestly, schools can choose it too, not just
Right,
families.
Right, and then it's,
Right,
then it's a public school.
And I kind of agree with
Yeah.
you. I think it's not permanent.
No, and that's where, I mean, if we get to records as well, that's why parents should be keeping their own portfolios, because Brenda's going away.
But the concern as home educators is,
That's just an aside.
you know, the home education laws are that those protections shouldn't be the other
Mhm.
bucket. They truly should be preserved for home education.
Right.
Yeah.
I hear what you're saying, because we
Yeah.
talked about this last.
So are there other, and again, forgive my naivety, I guess, but are there other home education programs that families can sign up for that would help do the whole curriculum for their child?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes.
And
Many
you
are.
can-
Sure.
At Acton.
Okay, so you can
Yeah.
pick and choose.
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
You can go
And
online
you
and
can
buy whole
refuse to do a
curriculums.
test, you can refuse to
you have your
participate in
choice.
anything,
You
right?
have your choice. If
Okay.
you follow the home education law.
Right, and
Right,
so
okay.
Acton does follow the home
Yeah.
education law and providing either option for their families. Because again, they're notifying, even though they are a micro school, that's what they're considered. Everyone notifies as a homeschooler.
Yeah.
Acton provides the curriculum, the activities, but at the end, the parents decide if they want to do portfolio review or standardized testing,
But
and
if-
Sarah provides that.
Right, but if they don't want to participate in half the classes or something, that's okay. They're not agreeing to anything ahead of time like you do with Apprentice. Again, playing devil's advocate with
They
other
would be
programs.
agreeing ahead of time
Which
to
is-
what the curriculum is because they
Right.
pay tuition.
And they would be held to
Yes.
to a performance standard, right? It's not, I'm not saying,
That's a question for Sarah.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, again, I'm
So,
just trying to understand.
I have a question, and we're here to talk about home education. I get that, so I don't, but part of it is, I haven't researched Brenda because I'm very happy with what the home education in my family and my children. But I'm curious, if you're in a pod school, right, let's call it that, and there's government funding attached to it that says that you must take these tests. Do you have the option to opt out your child just as you would in a public school?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know
Okay.
the answer to that.
So I think we're, oh,
Michelle
Michelle does.
You have to unmute.
Yes, it expressly says that family on the Prenda website, it expressly says that participating families can opt out. And that's not a right that homeschoolers have. All homeschoolers must provide an annual assessment, yet the Prenda families who are falling under 193A can opt out because that's an option that public school kids have. So there's some things that don't align
Yeah.
as a standard here. And I asked about that to the people that are running Prenda, and they repeated it over and over. It's on their website.
Thank you.
That's interesting.
Yeah, Brenda's definitely a different thing.
So I sent Alexis, I think Sarah's actually at the door.
Yes.
So I sent Alexis down to.
There
she
is.
is.
Yeah, she is. Yeah.
It's like what happened to me.
Is that what I'm looking at?
I was like, is she right outside?
Yeah, she's sent it to me a couple times. Had this exciting discussion going on.
No. She heard us.
Thank you.
Yay. Yeah, so maybe a kind of a fourth bucket. And we haven't even talked about EFAs.
Michelle?
There are already 4 categories, educational pathways in New Hampshire. So Prenda would fall on this other bucket, which would be a 5th. So the 4 that already exist are public education, of which there's local district and charters. The second bucket is private education. The third bucket is home education. And the last one that currently exists is the EFA program. Those are all already in the compulsory education statute as the 4 recognized educational pathways. So Prenda seems to be a unique blend that has similarities to some and a little bit of this, a little bit of that, but it doesn't fall cleanly, in my opinion, into the home education bucket because it has these other aspects that makes it quite different. And as some other people have said, I don't think Prenda is going to be the only program that New Hampshire sees that is some sort of hybrid or mix. So having the home education pathway as the catch-all seems inappropriate, in my opinion.
You'd have to change the law though, right?
Right.
And-
But
Yeah.
Well, I don't know.
No, you would, because those are listed in there. That's what Michelle's saying. In the statute, right?
Those are listed,
Yeah.
although I don't know what other powers the commissioner has. I tried to look at the law. I'm not a lawyer. I don't. So maybe. I tried to write, oh, did you get all of the papers?
So a 5th pathway would be a legislative thing.
That would be a legislative
Yeah.
thing. So I wrote this in an open way. Okay, so we're looking, maybe we need another bucket. If it's not there, maybe a legislative thing to address it. Or, look at what the concern is.
Mhm.
So I made a motion just to discuss this. We've already approved the last minutes. Did you get a chance to read those?
Yes.
Okay, so it's continuing that discussion
Right.
on Prenda and other things that are currently people are required to notify under 193A to take with Prenda Pod or to start into VLAX. And there's some other federal programs up and coming. So it's more a broadly worded discussion to point out those 4 points are important freedoms that home educators want to make sure we maintain. The best idea being use another bucket. I don't know exactly how the law works with that. It's a recommendation. If not, look and see, okay, if you're doing one of these other programs, can you be guaranteed these freedoms so we don't set a precedent of taking them away from people who are notifying under 193A?
I mean, as the motion is worded, it is open. I mean, like you could sum it up in the last sentence. That goes along with what the conversation has been meeting after meeting. And it certainly seems consistent to report that as part of the annual report.
But the question is, this recommendation, is this something that we want to make to the commissioner to look and say, hey, we're concerned about these freedoms, we're concerned about what's happening. Can you take a look at this? What can you do in the current law that's there? If not, when you're telling people to notify, can these freedoms be guaranteed?
Yes.
Does that, if people feel that that's reasonable, or if there's something that should be edited here, if they feel this is reasonable, would somebody make a motion to propose that this recommendation be looked at?
Well, there was a motion and a second, so we
To
would just need a,
discuss, Right?
To discuss, but then you have to make a decision
right,
whether
you
you're
could
gonna
call a
vote on
vote.
it or not.
Yeah,
Whether to vote on it.
right, can we call a vote on it? Do we need a second to call a vote?
Or does anyone else have,
Any other discussion?
any other discussion?
Okay, so let me just get this because I came in a little bit late. All right, so what we're saying is we want to put in our annual, because that's what this meeting's about, right?
Mhm.
What we're gonna send to the commissioner is a concern,
Mhm.
right? That we want to protect these liberties, right?
Well, this is a separate motion to do this, and then we will look at the report.
Right,
Yeah.
right, so I'm saying though that there's a concern
Yes,
that these freedoms or liberties would be eroded
right.
by adding other things in that require things, other pieces to them that are not consistent with these 4 guarantees.
Yes,
Okay. Mhm. So in other words, if you're using Prenda and you can do those 4 things, it can sit in that bucket. If you're using Prenda and it can't, then it can't sit in that bucket.
right.
Okay.
I mean, I would suggest if you talk to me that the best thing would be another bucket, but that's not my decision. But- Yeah, yeah. Just look at the concern, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's generally worded, so it doesn't mention Prenda, it doesn't mention VLAX, it's everything.
So motion to accept, or do we vote first?
I think you make a motion to accept it, and then somebody has to second, and then you vote, I think.
Okay, motion to accept.
Second.
Okay, so that was you and Tim, and I'm in favor.
Favor.
Unanimous.
I love it, you're doing great. I was like, every once in a while I go, "Oh, what do we do?"
And with that, just a clarification question. Since we just approved this, would this be just inserted into, what is it, page 3?
Yes.
Yeah,
on the
that's,
report? Okay.
that's why I tried to pre-write something, so we could get done by the end of
Thank you. Great idea.
the. Yeah, and so then the second old business was the concern that Amanda and Michelle had brought up that we discussed last time, the HEAC
Yeah.
test in place of the GED, that the participating agency was being asked to sign off for permission for 16 and 17-year-olds to take it. And they're like, why do we need to sign this? Because it's the parent in charge of it. You know, they don't
Right.
see the curriculum, and also there's other freedoms. The parent signs for things. Like, so on that same page, I mean, is there any?
We already talked about this one last time.
Okay, so should I make a motion, or do you want to, on this page, I wrote something up. I don't know if it's the best
Make a
word.
motion to accept, because we could always discuss that before we vote.
So
So,
make a motion to discuss, I mean, to accept.
yes.
I second that.
Okay, so I made the motion to,
Do we need to talk more about it? So really what we're saying is we want the parent, we don't want to have an agency, isn't that what we're saying? Sign off on this.
well, does this make sense how
Yeah.
I wrote it, or does it sound
Yeah.
stupid?
Yeah.
Because that I would also insert into the
Yeah,
report.
I think it's perfect. It's exactly what we talked about.
And I did bring that to the attention of the commissioner. He's in favor of doing that, so I'm reached out to Sarah Wheeler, who's runs adult ed, and we're gonna try and get together next couple weeks. to
Oh, perfect.
talk that-
So in
Start
that-
talking that through.
In
Yeah.
that case, we just all accept.
Yeah, do we vote? Everybody accept it?
All in favor?
Unanimous? There we go.
Any opposed?
So then we can go on to the report, and then we can double back to our individual reports. So does everybody have a copy of the draft of the annual report?
Thank you so much for sending this out in advance of the meeting with the minutes. It was so great to have in review before stepping foot into the meeting.
You're welcome.
So helpful.
I actually edited it afterwards, but I figured I would just leave it and so that you could see what I was thinking. I put bullet points out. Well, first of all, did everybody get a chance to read it?
Mhm.
The last page, I copied over from what's been put into the report year after year after year, basically the law on how HEAC is established. And I just noticed today that it's actually, with the update of the rules, it's ED 31509. So I would scrap the 10 and fix it to 09. But right there on that last page, it actually details out the duties of the council and the assigned areas of responsibility. So I was thinking, instead of bullet pointing it right on the first page, that I would just scrap that and say, see the end of the report. Is that okay?
So you're saying it's repetitive?
It's repetitive,
Okay.
I think, and I didn't notice that.
So are you saying scrap the first page bulletin points or the last page? part?
The first, 'cause I would just keep the last page as is, other than changing the number, because it's been used year after year after year. And it just reminds everyone why the council was established and what the duties are. So what I was trying to reference in the report was, okay, we had so many new
Where
members.
we reoriented
We
that first
reoriented,
meeting.
and these are the duties, and then it occurred to me, oh, we already said that. So to say, see end of report,
So just the bulleted point. right?
just the bulleted
Right.
points,
And then adds.
I'm crossing out. Yeah, and add
Okay.
see the end of report, so I'm referencing there. And I guess as we're giving the report, we actually could flip to the end of the page and read them. If, depending on how receptive and how much time we have. Then on the second page, I just noticed I was a little redundant where I said, as the new membership of the council came together, we worked together. So I figured that I would just scrap that second together.
Yeah, we want to make recommendations.
Yeah. And then in red, I said, insert here council's high set recommendation. So since this was accepted as is, I would just insert that there. So I would say, the council made the following recommendation. Blah, 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 blah. Then on the third page, I basically detailed out the concerns that we had discussed about Prenda previously and about HEAC and what we were looking at. And then I said, in response to the concerns about what educational programs fit the definition of home education, we did whatever we did, which I'm saying the wrong thing in the wrong place.
Yep, so that is
yeah.
going to be inserted here.
So, yeah. The one that matches that goes there, and the high set goes where that matches.
Yep. We got
So are there other suggestions or edits that should be made to this report? Does it make sense? Did I miss something? Yes.
I just had a couple on, so one of my recommendation, put page numbers on.
Oh,
That's always helpful for people reviewing it. And it's just one of the things I always try to do. When you get much longer documents, obviously it's more of it can be helpful when you're reviewing. So on page 3, where you talk about Granite State home educators.
Yeah.
21, I think on my version, I don't know if I have the most recent, state wasn't capitalized.
Yeah.
And then if you want to add the acronym GSHE because you use it later.
I should put in parentheses.
Yeah. Because you do use that later, but
Yeah.
that's all I had. I just couple of,
Yeah, that's helpful.
everything looked great.
Now, where did we land? So I love this. Where did we land on the conversations as it came up through home educator parents asking about what did we decide or what did we, it wasn't really a decision, but where did we land on the part about, so sometimes schools don't know what's going on with the kid or whatever, and the state or vice versa, families are concerned, like, why are people coming to my house? Remember that conversation? Where, I know we're not capturing everything in our end of year report.
I did mention it.
Did you?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
And the reason I mentioned it,
Yeah.
I mean, it was nothing for us really to
right,
do about it. It was just a
right. We
concern
can, it is a concern.
that is brought up. It's brought up a lot. Homeschoolers have this concern. So one of the reasons for the council is so that home educators can talk to people from public school, public education representatives. So I'm showing that the council's
Two, yeah.
actually having that communication we're supposed to.
Yeah.
So if you told us and Mike told us,
Oh,
this
there it
is,
is, yeah.
this is how it works, we can go back, and I did actually, I went back to my home education group
Yeah.
and I wrote up a report and I put in it, this is what they said.
Mhm.
And it helps relieve people. Like, this is what's supposed to be happening.
Yes, there it is. Yep.
So what I'm trying to.
Because I think
yeah.
that's an important thing, because I think that creates friction that doesn't need to be there.
Right, yes,
Mhm.
exactly.
Yeah.
So hopefully we can point
Do
out
something with it.
to the board that there's communication here
Mhm.
to show, yeah, to decrease the friction. Was there anything else I should say about it?
No, actually, it's fine. Yep.
When do, Jen, when and Amanda, Amanda and Jen, when do you guys present this to the State Board of Ed?
So, yeah, it can be either, it's up to you. I mean, it could be July 14th or August 11th are the two state board meetings. It's the second, Thursday of the month.
I think either one's okay for me.
I can
You would
do
just-
August 11th. I can't do the July.
Okay,
And we have to have everything to the board 2 weeks ahead of time. So that's kind of our cutoff. So it's usually around the end of the prior month. This way you can get it to their administrator, but I can get you on the agenda for either of those, as long as I have your report. And would both of you be presenting? Because I want to provide that
Yeah,
information.
it's
as
a
well.
good team right here. They're dynamic.
I don't like public presentation.
You'll be fine.
Oh, there.
That was the deal.
They're-
That was why.
That was the deal.
yeah, they're a great board.
Yeah, all right, so it'll be August 11th.
Okay, thank you.
Jen, to clarify, this insert council's recommendation or plan, is our recommendation to have another bucket,
Our
public, private, EFA, homeschool,
No, our recommendation will be exactly what's written here.
just defining the freedoms and then let them take it from there.
Well,
Yeah.
it has
Right,
that last
should follow
paragraph.
the last
sentence.
Yeah, so it says it could be under another option.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not going so far as to say,
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
so we're stating the problem and our potential
Yep.
solutions. So yeah. Anything else on the report? Discuss, look at, right?
You don't have to reference that thing where those men came, right? Not the last, yeah, I don't want to do that. I really loved how you do handle that.
Oh, yeah, well, all this is drawn from the minutes,
So,
so they can go back and they can look at the minutes and what's in the minutes.
all right.
Okay, so can I make a motion to accept the annual report
As amended?
as
yeah.
amended?
Second.
Aye.
All right.
Oh, yeah, before we go to reports, there was one important thing brought up by the senator and Representative Cordelli as well. They've not been able to be present here throughout the year, and they really would like to participate, and I think it is very important that we hear what they have to say and they hear what we have to say. Glenn Cordelli said that his good days are Monday and Friday. I mean, for me personally, Monday is terrible.
I can't do Monday.
So I wanted to bring up the possibility that we could change the meeting date to a Friday to accommodate the legislators.
Does it need to be Friday late afternoon or can it be?
I don't know.
And I was gonna say, could we meet a little earlier?
Well, Fridays are fine for most of us. I do have GELCAR the third Friday during session. That goes from 9 to 12, anything after that.
Also, we could do like, what if we did like
Second.
Or you could do we're the third now. We could do the third Friday in the afternoon, like at, I don't know, 2 to, or you think like earlier would be better?
So,
Is that hard on you guys with your homeschooling?
well, Fridays are usually a little freer.
I
That's
love
all.
that. It should be.
Yeah, so I mean, one day a month I take off if needed anyway.
Yeah.
And the kids score very well on government questions on exams.
My experience, as I told you when I came and joined you, were the homeschool families that I worked with in Concord did extremely well every year. Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, it takes me about a half hour to get here. Some
Me too.
people, maybe it takes a little longer. So if I had lunch and got done, I could probably get here by 2.
That's what I was thinking, because it would be easier for me.
I think before 2 might be a little hard. I mean, we have
I
people
wouldn't be
coming
able
from
to.
all over the state too.
Unless
I-
you want to make
I
2:30,
couldn't get here
you
at
couldn't.
2.
What's doable for you?
2:30 is doable, yeah.
30 to 4.
Yeah, why don't we do 2:30 to 4?
Okay.
Okay, so how, so.
So we'd add that right into.
So I'd like to make a motion that we change the HEAC meetings from Thursdays to Fridays, beginning at 2:30 PM.
Then you just have to say which Friday.
The third Friday of every other
Is
month.
that good for you, son?
Pardon?
Is that good for you?
That's fine.
Perfect.
Then I'm thinking about all those people who like to leave early Friday to go up skiing or go out to the beach or something.
You still can leave at 4.
But I mean,
Yeah.
once a month, I have to be here anyhow for Delco in the morning, so that's perfect.
Make the meeting move along.
That's
I
right.
used to have a boss who had all the staff meetings Friday afternoon.
Sure,
See.
little motivation.
No stories, just got to work.
I love that.
Okay,
So that was a motion. Did someone second it?
I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And that's the third Friday, so we're
Third.
staying.
Good Friday, yeah.
So when I
So
set
we
up
start up
the
again in
next schedule.
September,
we
right?
just, whenever we have it, we always
Mhm.
look for holidays. So if this happens to fall like right on Christmas, we won't meet that day.
Yeah, actually, I'll make a note to look.
When do we meet
look for all of it.
We're usually scheduled to meet again in September.
Right, so the 3rd.
Unless some emergency comes up, like somebody says, I don't know, something. We've never met in the summer as far as I
Never
know.
had a special meeting as far as you remember.
No, not for 7 years.
Okay.
Maybe before that.
No, that would only
That's
happen.
an
once
advisory
in
council.
summer.
Arose, I mean, I'm sure you guys could call a meeting.
Yeah, like if
Right.
they said we absolutely have to address something in the law.
Yeah, we just have to notice it properly.
Right.
And we're all set.
Okay.
Okay. So yeah, usually September through May or June.
So I'll use that to set up the
Yeah, I would probably
next year's
put,
web
I would
page.
put
Yeah.
through June because you have the
Yep.
legislative session going through and like the bill was passed. So I was thinking if I had to write it all by May, I wouldn't have the report
Right,
complete.
And then it's monthly, right?
Mhm.
No, every other month.
Every other month.
So it'd be September, but then you have the alternate month.
We
which-
show a placeholder. typically,
Placeholder in
yeah.
case.
Yeah, because I usually thought it was at the month.
Well,
Isn't
we
that
did,
funny?
we did 2 in a row because we missed.
Right.
There's like a
That's a
makeup.
couple. Okay.
Yeah, shouldn't be that hard.
You can always cancel the meeting.
Well, we canceled May, right? We thought about whether or not we should meet and said, no, let's just go to June.
Yeah, for Delco, for example, we always have an added day just in case we don't finish the business. And if we finish the business on that Friday, then we say we cancel the follow-up meeting. So then we'll just so that it knows. But we do meet on the third Friday all through the year, so.
So then with that in mind, the motion was every other month. Should we amend that to monthly?
No.
No, because
Okay.
again, as long as we properly notice. I think
Okay.
we're all set, yeah.
So if people have reports, they could mention it. I had a couple, there's some more stuff on new business. I didn't know if you want to finish that first and then go back to reports. If there's, which way do you want to do this? New business.
Yeah, it's already got 2 down.
Yeah.
Check, check.
Okay, so House Bill 1663, which we've been mentioning, passed into law and was signed. So there may be some rulemaking. Maybe Tim, you could mention what you found out.
Yeah, I spoke with Attorney Fenton today, Chris Bond, who has worked, I think, in the past on some of these. He's back at the AG's office now. And our rulemaking person, Amanda, she's left the department, so we're a little short-staffed right now. But I did talk to talk to Diana Fenton. And she just said that there is a role, obviously, for HEAC in the rulemaking process, and that there is no defined timeline for this rulemaking. So my first task is to take the new law, look at the existing rules to see if there's any omission or any new information that needs to put in or conflicts. And I'll do that and then meet again with Diana on what the next step would be from there as far as rulemaking, and then engage the committee on that.
I have a question about the rulemaking process because I haven't been here for that yet. But when that's opened because of new legislation, is there a limited scope on what can be done in the rulemaking
Yeah,
process?
I don't have any, I've never myself been through the rulemaking process either, so.
Okay.
But yeah, you
What
mentioned it
about some people
earlier.
who've been,
I just listen to them. I don't make them.
okay,
I wouldn't do the rulemaking process, but that's because the commissioner came to us and said, I want to look at these rules and I want to redo them. And I heard from the veterans that the process they went through was very different from the process they went through before. But because the commissioner opened it up, in general, we did look at everything.
okay.
This being specifically for changes in the law, that's a very good question.
Right, and I don't know if there's a decision that can be made whether to open them up further or not, because obviously if it's in the law, those rule changes, I think, will be fairly limited and very direct to respond to the changes in the law.
Would you
I
be
think if you
able,
open it up to everything, I think there's going to be a lot more
right,
involvement in that,
Right.
just because of people will want to weigh in.
right. Could you ask some questions and come back and let us
Yes.
know next
Oh, yeah.
meeting?
Yes, I'll
Awesome.
find out.
Thank you.
Printed copies of the law, and if I could really quick, I put the changes into the report so that the Board of Education would be aware of what has changed. And on the first page of the act, there's numbers here, and you go down around line 5, it changes may to shall. So that's not actually 193A, it's 193(1)C, equal access. And so it says that the local school boards will actually or shall be adopting policy. It's not a may, you may do it, it's you will do it. And at the end of it, it says effective August 31st, 2022. So they have a little bit more time to look at that. Another change is down near line 17. Traditionally, they've said home education shall be provided by the parent. They've inserted the words coordinated or directed. And exactly the definition of that, maybe that's something people will look at. And they put his or her own child. And they crossed off the line unless the provider is as otherwise agreed upon by the appropriate parties named in paragraph 2. So it used to be that you could agree with your participating agency. It removes the participating agency from the decision now, what to do with the curriculum. Then I also noticed line 23 is actually an insert. So it says new paragraph home education notifications. And what they did is it used to be that you had to notify the commissioner, even if you hadn't notified him you were starting, you have to notify him that you're completing your program, which didn't necessarily make a whole lot of sense. So now you just notify whoever you notified in the first place. Then on the last page, under line 1, they brought something from the home ed rules and inserted it into the law, saying the portfolio remains at all times the property of the parent.
Yeah.
And I find it interesting. I didn't notice at first. It says it crossed off by the parent. So it says shall be preserved for 2 years, but they crossed off by the parent. So if somebody else is preserving it, maybe, I don't know.
Student might be.
Mm,
I mean, if you're 18 and
Yeah,
we've had questions about that
come into our office where the student's looking for information, wants us to issue something. We ask, well, who has the records?
Who has, yeah. And then on line 5, they changed demonstrate educational progress at a level commensurate with child's age and ability to age, ability, and or disability. So the thought is, if you have a child, say with dyslexia or another disability, and a child usually would make such and such progress to be reasonable. Well, you have to think about that. Don't expect more than you would expect in any other form of education. That's my understanding.
I love that,
Yeah.
to be honest with you, being a champion of special education. That's a really important insert, because actually over the years, there were families who were very worried when they had students with disabilities doing homeschool evaluations because, oh, what's going to happen?
Right.
And I would end up writing an extra letter in support of those families, so.
Right.
Mhm.
And then the last part is lines, it's like 11 through 15. It used to be that to demonstrate reasonable progress, you had to, if you chose the option to take the standardized test, you had to make at or above the 40th percentile. That also sort of plays in with the disability.
Right.
Like what if you chose that and this happens, it's not showing that you're lacking reasonable educational progress. And also they looked at the other educational options don't need to show that. So it's an equitable. So that's changed. So this is law now. I didn't notice anything else in there.
Yeah, so again, I don't know that, I haven't done the exercise yet, but from just what I recall, there's not a lot of changes, I think, to the rules themselves.
I have a what if question. What happens if a school, as the amendment to the law states that there is no adopted policy regarding the access of home educated students? What's the recourse for someone who may notice that? Because we do have people who go around and audit school policies.
Yeah.
Is that just a notification to the DOE that a district is not in compliance? I mean, instead of running around to each school board, right? Like, that would be the nice thing to do, right? To tell the school board, hey, you're not in compliance, you need to address this. But just as a quick remedy, what happens in those instances?
So I can speak to, in my prior role at the Department of Federal Compliance, was
Okay.
over 4 years, that's what we did. Schools are required to have certain policies because they receive federal funds. And 90% of schools had no policies. So the schools use the New Hampshire School Boards Association. Many schools are members of that group and they write the model policies. So I don't want to speak for the person who's going to be looking at this issue, making sure schools do it, but it would be simply reaching out to them, which is what I did with the federal policies. And we just had a conversation and said, your schools now need to have this policy. They write up the policy, they distribute it to their school. Now, it doesn't cover everybody,
Right.
but
However, it's up to the individual school boards to adopt policy.
yes.
And
based
so
on-
they can have that boilerplate policy from the New Hampshire School Board Association
Right.
and not adopt policy.
Correct. And they change
Michelle
it.
has her hand
Yeah.
up.
Thank you, April. So yes, the New Hampshire School Board Association provides model policies, but when I saw the last one they did, it had errors in it. And I've worked with the School District Governance Association on another boiler template that could be considered. So there are a couple sources that districts could use as a launch for discussion about how to make it their own, because they still have the ability to make some adjustments so long as it met the criteria of
Right.
that equal access law. So there's two options available.
Okay, but I don't think, maybe I didn't word my question
No.
correctly, but what happens if a school district, school board is not in compliance and does not have this? What is the remedy? Would it be for someone to place a complaint to the DOE?
My understanding is that a parent would go to the school board and make that complaint or ask for that to be corrected. And
Yeah,
if
but
they don't
this-
get satisfaction
So
there,
this is
it may
August
raise to the
31st,
state
right?
board of education.
Right,
Right, and it's a really short timeline. I work in a school district in central office. I know this stuff, right, because I read the laws and I'm in this group, right? And then I will go back and I'm in other groups in the state around legal stuff, the legislative group for the special ed administrator team. So I bring that stuff back. I guess for me, the flip side of what you're saying is who's ensuring that school districts know, right? So laws pass, there's a Department of Education. I love, Michelle, that you said there's two different, so far, there are two sort of models, right, of what could be adopted by a school board. Interestingly, some school boards don't meet all
Yeah.
summer long. They might meet once. So there is definitely sometimes a lag time between when something happens and when somebody, so that, I don't know, I find that a little concerning that people might just go around to audit just for the purpose of seeing whether or not someone's doing something wrong. I don't like that, I'll be honest. What
It
I
happens in a
prefer-
lot of fields, not
I'm
just.
sure,
schools. Yeah.
I guess for me, what would be more important is if someone is experiencing that, that should absolutely be reported to someone. Like, I want to come in and I want my child. So simultaneously with this law, the Department of Ed has made monies available to get co-curricular and after-school activities. People don't know about that either necessarily, to start clubs, to get grants, school districts to get grants so that they can start programs for kids, whether they're, you know, peer-to-peer type things, or even things like Best Buddies and other things like that to do. So there's a lot of neat things that are happening. I guess for me, I worry sometimes, like, how is that communicated from, right, our legal system to the Department of Ed, to the local communities, the LEAs? Because my experience is people want to do the right thing, right? People want to do the right thing.
Is it a
And
technical
this-
advisory?
So yes, usually
Yeah,
the
let me check
DOE
with them.
sends out a
Yeah.
thing, usually, and then there is the rulemaking part
Mhm.
of the process. So this is a law, they have to now establish the rules, and there's a time frame for that. They have a period of time to do that.
As far as establishing rules.
Yes,
I asked our attorney and she said there was not.
so.
And the law always supersedes the rules.
Of
Right.
course, right.
Yeah.
So,
So yeah, I think a technical.
so
advisory
I'll be
to
at the New Hampshire
district.
School Administrators Association in June, and I'll be sure to be telling them, you need to make sure you have that. So Michelle, can you email me your sample policy? And I can get the school board one because I see them every month.
I'd be happy to.
Yeah, I think the more people work together, the better it is for our state. Yeah,
And Amanda actually went to work with Barrett.
Yeah.
Hampshire School Boards Association. So
Oh,
she's
well,
familiar with
that's
the
a good-
state process.
that's perfect. Well, yeah, and everybody, they do collaborate quite well.
Yep.
That's been my experience. So I would say that if somebody was looking and it wasn't in there, they would want to alert the school board for sure that there's a policy that's missing.
And let me talk with Nate about reaching out to, is it Jody that heads up? Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. So I talked to her again, when I was doing federal compliance, I worked with both organizations. But let me talk with Nate Green, who's my supervisor, about trying to get technical assistance, technical advisory out. And maybe to both of them.
I mean,
and to
again,
the
it's just a
schools.
what if
Yeah.
question because.
Yeah. Well, the timing is difficult because
Oh,
most school
well,
boards
that's
don't
what's so
meet.
interesting. So
Yeah.
part of this is June,
They generally
which
form a
is easy.
subcommittee.
right? The easy part here is easy.
Yeah.
That first part is to actually have a written policy. You have to go in a school board, you have to read that 3 times in public.
Yep.
Like, there's a process. So it's actually counter to the legal process for how school boards adopt stuff too. What would be key though is honestly, under section 504, right? Disability rights, you already have non-discriminatory practice. So if someone was experiencing that with a school district or not, their child not being, denied access to stuff, you already have that trumps everything. So while this law is very specific around home school, home education kids and their ability to have the same access to stuff, equal access, that might be something in the middle, why school districts do that, because in order for a policy to be done, it has to be read publicly 3 times by the school board.
I wonder if this would force the school boards to have some summer meetings. Because this is an issue that I know Granite State Home Educators, I personally had to deal with in the Rochester district. And it did go all the way up to Attorney Fenton, that
is something that we are constantly encouraging and empowering parents to take care of, to make those phone calls, but we will step in on the other side of that if things are not going well. And this is very, very common. So this
So what
is,
is happening? Like kids are wanting to join like a club or a group or do something after school and the school saying no.
yes.
Unbelievable.
Who's the
Yeah, we get
access
those as
point
I can't even believe
for these schools? Like, is it a certain person at the school? Do you have to go through the principal? And does it depend on what, if it's a sport or if it's a extracurricular?
So there's no actual law written to speak to that. So really, it depends on the district. So we're advising them to call the administrator, the superintendent's office.
Unless I call that off.
And then, but I know of many instances that the parents have just called up the band director or called up the athletic director, and that's been fine as well. Is it fine? I don't know. Don't know. But there's no procedural outline for any of this. And interestingly, Michelle can speak to this as well, that she went and looked at a large amount of public school districts and whether or not they had a policy at all, and the majority did not, or it was incredibly legally outdated, as was Rochester's from 1996. So they just didn't know what they didn't know,
Yeah,
and I think that's
right.
what we're concerned about.
Yeah, that's what I've done when I've had these issues come in with parents, is I've sent to school the law, the copy of the perfect
Yeah.
section of law,
Yeah.
and they resolved it right away.
Yeah.
So, which was good.
You sent it to the parent or the school?
To school, you
School.
send it, yeah, that's what I do. Like,
Well,
when you
he's
get
the
a team that's not doing
department,
something,
so-
just send them, here's the actual law right here.
Yeah, and it's polite,
Very
professional.
Yeah.
Because they just don't know.
They don't, yeah.
Yeah.
And so that means there's probably not even a process, like you call the athletic director, say, hey, my kid plays baseball, when are the tryouts? And then it's just like.
And so remember, we were talking about, when do that communication, is that part of equal access? When do I
Right.
know when the signups are? When do I know when the prom is?
Yeah.
Sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
So I run into it with the non-public schools as well, because they're all entitled to access to their home district, not co-curricular activities as well.
Yeah,
And so that's where it comes.
this
in as
changes the
well.
law for them too.
So I will take this and share that with that association the next meeting. So I'm supposed to report out about my time here. And I'm gonna bring that to their attention. So the superintendent's at least now. She can't say later, you didn't know. As long as you were in attendance in the meeting or you read the minutes.
So what's the
You
name
know.
of the
New
group?
Hampshire School Administration, it's this group that I'm representing here.
So
I
this-
sit on two teams. I sit with you guys, I represent the New Hampshire School Administrators, which is Superintendent's Office. I also sit on the New Hampshire Association of Special Ed Administrators, and that's also a place, that group always talks about this stuff. Because really, they spend all of their time in legal things and all of the rights. So that team, they do a lot of that. So we do a lot of educating our own district staff around legal things, like, yeah, no, actually, here it is. Here's the law, and you share it. People don't get mad. You just, it's about this.
So you do know that homeschoolers don't have access to special education services in New Hampshire.
I do know
Does
that.
not fall under the curricular,
I
co-curricular.
do know. Very aware of that.
But I think some districts can choose to
Yeah,
give
well,
it.
that, and that's the truth, right, so
But it
in
falls under a
cases,
different rule.
right, right. It is not, well, because special education is in fact not a co-curricular or extracurricular. And I'll get on the mat on that one too. I don't want it in that bucket.
Yeah.
Kind of like you guys with Brenda,
Yeah.
we're not going there.
Yeah.
However, yes, school districts can choose to do that.
Yeah.
Mhm. So you're gonna have tremendous variability.
So
Right.
that's interesting, because what if a child who does have a disability wants to join in a class or co-curricular? And there needs to be, equal access. How does that, that's even, how do you accommodate that child when they're participating in a public school program? Are they still accommodated?
So technically by law, you would have to figure out a way to do that.
Okay,
So that's interesting. So there's where you have some legs, right? If you think about this. So I'll bring that to that group too, so to think about. So when I think about that, I think about ways. So for example, in the two districts that I've worked in New Hampshire, you're not, so here's what, you're not entitled to your IEP
Right.
And the district's not responsible. See, that's the difference.
Yes.
But you can provide services to a child. It's just that a parent can come in and say, here's my kid's IEP, you must do all these things. Because they're not running their school program. And that would be like saying to you, right, you want to protect those 4 points about parents having that. You can't be expecting that public agency to take on all that responsibility. And at the same time, you could offer kids services.
Yeah.
So kids might come and get speech, or they're in a group. We have kids zooming into some things, right, from their home or stuff like that. But it's interesting you say this, because when you look at it from a civil rights point of view, if a child is coming in to participate and they need support, let's say, right, districts typically, like we have monies, I have monies in my department set aside for after school hours, hiring paraeducators or supports for kids so they can participate fully in stuff. Some of that money at the Department of Ed right now might be available for things like this, because there's a whole new thing around this co-curricular, really working at getting kids who come from ethnic and linguistically diverse backgrounds and special education involved in clubs and activities and after-school activities. So in that case, that will be a very interesting scenario where a family wants a child to participate who's complex, does not go to the public school, but they're going to need support to participate. So that should be something they think about when they're writing this technical assistance. How's that going to play out?
But isn't it required that they should offer the initial testing, even though they,
We do that, right? So you
Yeah.
can, so often, a family, I've had that happen even, and recently, actually twice. A family has come forward and said, I really want my child evaluated. Right? And even, I agree, I understand the part about sometimes people don't know, because at the school, they'll call over it, like, is that okay? I'm like, yes. So you go through the whole process and you offer an IEP.
Yeah.
And then the family's gonna say, I'm gonna reject that because I want to do homeschooling, but it gives them that information they need.
So that's federal law, so the public schools have to provide the testing services, but they do not have to provide the therapy services.
The IEP.
but the testing could be key if you want to get your child extra time for like the SATs. or
Yes, absolutely.
And then to speak to April's question, in my experience, and this is part of what I do in the community, those students are told, we cannot support you.
That would
So-
be my fear as a child, as a parent of children with disabilities,
And-
who I want to be in an inclusive
Right,
Right.
community, because really that's what we're hoping to build, right? A better community.
right.
Yeah.
But typically, that homeschooler who has extra needs is told that they can't accommodate them. Yeah.
It is interesting. So this actually, so we had a scenario that actually came through my office recently where somebody asked about it. So it was a student who was going into kindergarten, wanted to go to an after school, which was a private after school, like after school thing, so the parent could work till like 5 o'clock. The child has Down syndrome, so they're not toilet trained yet. That's related to the disability, and the program said no. And so the question was there anything we could do? Like, what could you do? So if it was a school-based activity, I would have said you have to support that, those students. And I wondered, I actually had to call into an attorney to ask, like, what happens legally with a private place? Because under the 1990 reauthorization of ADA, non-discriminatory practice across the board, right? So like, that's a whole challenge I learned from parents with kids with significant disabilities. They can't get their kids in after school things if they require supports. The family's supposed to provide them. So some families count through like gateways or community bridges up here in this region, or whatever they're called in the different regions in New Hampshire. But if those folks aren't available, and right now there's a terrible shortage,
Right.
then the parent can't work or something like that, is the story I'm hearing. It's just interesting. We could dedicate a whole meeting to this.
So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out.
Yeah, we'll actually,
Yeah.
now that we just talked about that, yeah,
Yeah.
equal access.
There will be a new office, the child advocate, who will deal with parents who have issues with their disabled children. So they have somebody they can go to, talk to, and that person will sort of get them through. Because when they go to regular school board meetings and the lawyers sit there, they don't know what to do. They don't get any help. So this is
Right.
in the works.
And that's a shame that public money is fighting against the resident student and their family too, who may or may not have the money to lawyer up. So that's another
Thank you.
issue, not related to
Is there
homeschooling.
anything else you wanted to tell us?
What?
Anything else?
No, all kinds of things, but.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Ruth.
And I was interviewed by New Hampshire Alternative Pathways Project with the National Center for College and Career Transitions. They are trying to do something for the Department of Education website to make people aware of all the different alternative pathways for like completion of high school, one being home education. You don't get a diploma, but we self-certify. And she said that there would be more opportunity for the department to see what they make and for us to make comments. She's not, it sounds to me like she's not from New Hampshire, but
No.
she is a consultant. So they're trying to understand the law right now. And being that the law is different from education, all the different states, she really was trying to see the difference between the EFA and home education. She had multiple questions and she asked me a lot of questions also about, well, what does the public school offer in New Hampshire for this, that, and the other thing? And so I referred her back to you. I don't know if she contacted you yet,
No, she didn't.
to speak with Heather and Mike. I said, they might know more about that than I do. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is a project where they're interviewing people from all the different pathways. So they're doing adult ed, they're working, they interviewed me for Learn Everywhere and the non-public schools and things like that. So what they're trying to do is put together a toolbox that would be available on the DOE website for parents to see, okay, well, what are my options here to get my kid, you know, to graduate? And even,
Love that.
even for older students that maybe have to come back and do the high set or get some adult ed, or, so they're working with Sarah. I think Sarah Wheeler in adult ed actually brought them in to do this work. So, yeah, it's pretty interesting stuff.
And information is power. So the more information you can get out there to
Yeah.
families to make informed decisions, that's fantastic.
So, and I do think there's a lag too, like even schools, like high schools or whatever, not really understanding Learn Everywhere.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, the department needs to do a better job messaging that to the guidance counselors, for example. I've had to
So
deal
maybe
with a
it's not
few.
even messaging. I just thought about this, because so that right there, just in that, in like 3 statements in the last 2 years, there's been a tremendous amount of change at the New Hampshire Education Department, right? In terms of pathways. What would be really cool is taking, you look at the model that they're using, like in special education, there's a lot of technical assistance where they create trainings, for example, and every couple months you can sign people up. Like you can go get, you know, indicator 11 or indicator 13 or case manager. And I'm just thinking, like, I could tell you right now, I think across the state, like, or about like this law, having someone, you know, it could even be videotaped or something where it's, you can go in and it's not just reading something. It's actually having someone, or even having that opportunity to do a little bit brief Q&A. But they usually run like hour-long trainings. They have a schedule every 2 months, a schedule of 2 months at a time. And there's a lot of technical pieces to special education. But so is there in all this stuff now too, like the basics of EFAs, or how does Learn Everywhere impact high school credit? And how many, I just heard this the other day, people in the high school were like, well, how many is a kid allowed to have? What's the high school gonna say? What's the policy,
They were
right?
asking me questions.
Yeah.
They need to submit her name for.
And see what I'm saying is, but most schools, it's not just guidance, the administrator, nobody knows.
Yeah.
And so the more we educate, knowledge is power, and people can make better choices, and you don't have that friction, you have flow.
She asked me, how do home educators know about all this? Well, we don't know about everything. So, yeah. I told her
Right,
like that we know
yeah.
people who are in the public school, and this is how we find out, or we are aware of what goes on, but
Well, so there's a Friday form that's sent out, but
I get that. Yeah.
so that's what we send out to the schools as well, and to non-publics get that as well. So unless your parents want to be in a mailing list, which I don't think they want to be in a mailing list.
I think it's hard. I mean, it should be opt-in. It's a big step to assume, because there are people who always want to know more, learn more, so they can be, you know, better advocates for their children, you know, for the best education they can get.
I agree. Yeah.
Or the support group leaders.
I think we could work on it some kind of, we could come up with a good project on this, because I do think that a lot of central office administrators, building level administrators, educators, support personnel, school counselors, all those folks do not know anything about these laws. And the
Agreed.
reason that we do in the special ed administration is how does that play out when you have students with IEPs?
Right.
And so we are very vigilant about new rules and laws and then informing people.
Mhm.
But in general, the law itself, how does that, there's a lag between school policy. You know, like I actually saw in the last week, policies in our high school around this exact stuff, like what the process a kid has to go through, which is laborious to do some kind of ELO. And I'm like, wow, that's like 10 years ago, man. We've come so far, maybe, but the institution takes longer to come. So how do we partner with the state, maybe with our association and the administrators and the principals group with the Department of Ed to work together to create these sort of technical opportunities of at least a few times a year for people to get up on this stuff.
Well, I know the commissioner, I mean, the department has I think it's a monthly call with all the superintendents. And what my experience was, a lot of that information never trickles down.
Never.
You know,
No,
the
and they're
special
not
ed
really
administrators,
necessarily
for example, didn't know any of the federal compliance
Yeah.
stuff we had been putting out for 2 years to BAs and superintendents. And we're like, why not? So, so we started going from the bottom up, you know,
Yeah.
and it's just a resource issue right now.
Well, that's why, yeah, I know, because it's like every, right, it's like, yeah,
trying
because
to
I was like, that's
Get that
the key.
information out, but it's the right, I mean, it's the right approach, obviously, is,
Yeah.
you know, get that information out. And then it saves me time in the end because I've had to deal with a couple guidance counselors who were refusing to accept Learn Everywhere credits, which they
I
simply
tell
cannot
them,
do.
man, you have to
You
take
have
it.
to take them, but.
That's it, right, and I guess, I
But
see,
it-
and I think they're thinking, well, here's the policy, here's the rules, this is
Right.
what we do here.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah,
like,
that
hey,
was
man, that
exactly it.
law passed last year.
Yeah.
This family can come in with as many as they want, you gotta take them. Well, no, it's the school,
Yeah,
the staff
and that
has
was
to look at
exactly
it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, well, I heard it my
So we
own,
walked
and
them
that's
through
where I was
it,
like,
you
oh,
know.
there's a
I'd like to
disconnect.
see that law too. I was
It's a
I was
really
asked that
interesting law.
by a home educator where
Oh, it's
students
a
were
wonderful
going.
program. I'm so excited. That's why I came back.
It's a
Yeah.
cool
Going into a
idea.
Public school.
Yeah,
I want to know how
yeah.
to do this. So I referred them to the information in the school's booklet, not realizing, okay, maybe it wasn't updated.
It's not updated. There's not a
Yeah.
lot, there's not a
Yeah.
lot of places that are, because again, schools are dealing with the pandemic. You had a year, this year was
Mhm.
probably the worst of the three. Because you, right, you were open, but people were out constantly with COVID. You were working probably at 70% staffing on any given day. That's a real thing.
Yeah.
And you were just, you got to do everything. And then everybody came back after this year of this half and half kind of thing or whatever these things. So people forgot how to work, people forgot how to be students, parent, everybody. It just,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's
Oh,
been
yeah.
a tense
Yeah.
year, I would say.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we're in a better place in the fall that people actually have the bandwidth
Mhm.
to do some of this cool work, because this is cool stuff. This is cutting edge. New Hampshire's ahead of a lot of other places.
Yeah.
And there's probably going to be a drive to access it more now because we've all gotten comfortable, right? During COVID being at home more, so are doing our own thing, you know, realizing that learning doesn't happen in a classroom only, you know.
Right. The relationships that happened,
Yeah.
the collaboration that, yeah. And then, of course, I don't know about Mike's experience, but what I watched is it went right back to the box. And that was the correction, right? We
Mhm.
know how to do that. I just want to go back to that. And I'm hopeful now that that innovation that occurred can continue to happen because it's true. Like a kid could do combinations of different things, like school
Yeah.
can and should look really different. It's 2022.
Many
Right.
options.
Right.
Like a big mixing pot, because in the end, right, we're talking about educating our children, they're going out in the real world and they're gonna be mixed in the real world.
Yeah, they live in the
Yeah.
same community.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exciting times for education.
And I did make a suggestion to the team, that question had come up about scholarships and access for home educators. I was like, could there be a section on here where you can look up scholarships that everyone's, they're available to everyone? I don't know if that's a part of the project that needs to be added.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's not a bad idea.
I tried to get more information about what was brought up last time about limited access to scholarships. I haven't gotten that far.
Yeah, so that would be district by district, though, right? I mean,
Well, it's not always
There could be some that are
private,
just,
yeah,
yeah.
private
Yeah.
scholarships.
There are many localized scholarships, but
Yeah.
there's some bigger organizations that could be
Yeah.
Put on the DOE site.
And maybe just a place where, like she was saying something about how it was hard for home educators to get on. I mean, I haven't gone through that yet with my kids. And I think some people, maybe they just go to the colleges, maybe they don't see every single scholarship. If there was a place, a bucket, you could put it on the DOE website, maybe it would just help everyone gain access.
You're getting a lot of work here, Tim, today.
No, that's fine.
I'm
Yeah.
teasing you.
I'm just
So,
trying to think of how that would work.
I'm curious because many years ago when I was in high school, I attended a seminar and basically there was a gentleman who was almost a broker of information where he was selling information about all these different scholarships. I'm not sure if that still exists, but it was like,
It does, yeah.
okay, because my family decided to pay for that and it told you where,
Selling it?
basically, yeah, he
Yeah, so
he
you-
assembled it
Never
all
heard of
together,
this.
yeah. And then it would tell you like you need to write a paper for this,
Yeah.
this
Oh,
is where you
wow.
apply.
A service that would identify scholarships you're
Oh.
eligible for.
Wow. Who knew?
So that's still around today.
Sure, you're a daughter of the American Revolution, or your family has
Right.
this heritage. or-
Right.
Yeah.
And so here's a pool of scholarships that you should apply to.
And that's probably
then-
online now
Yeah,
instead of a
yeah,
book.
right.
Okay.
Why didn't I know about that? My kids.
You
are
didn't
now
attend the
very-
seminar,
I
I
know.
guess.
You did. I should have been friends with you at that point. Mine are all graduated college now. I'm good.
We do have some limited information about scholarships and things like that on the Granite State Home Educators website. And I'm assuming, Thea is not here, but New Hampshire Homeschooling Coalition probably does as well. Because we do get questions fairly regularly about, is there scholarships available for homeschooling? But this is
For
like the
college.
next step,
Yeah,
right?
so home
Um,
educators applying for college.
Yeah.
I think this is something that could go further onto next year to talk about, because not everyone's here, and that's be
I can
nice.
kick it up to
Right.
higher ed then.
Well, and
I love it.
Yeah.
See?
Appleby will have
Good
to-
brains right here. We got it, guys. We can
Higher ed issue.
find the task and assign it to somebody.
And that would be a great
Other
recruiting
than us,
tool,
we'll be
right?
the brain trust.
Yeah.
In the meantime, Jen, or anybody who has a support group, like most schools, that information resides at the guidance
I
council.
was gonna say, you call the guys.
And so
Right.
call the guidance department.
It does.
They should just be able to email you a spreadsheet of
Tell your
scholarship
families to call the guidance
opportunities.
department.
Yeah.
If they're having a hard time, call central office.
The last meeting, they were saying that they were blocked from some scholarships because they couldn't put down they were part of the local district, and I'm still not.
Yeah, no,
fully
some are
in it.
specific to the high school
Yeah.
or played for the high school football team or
Yeah.
something.
Okay, they're not.
Oh,
Yeah.
this was the one that was the 1,000 that was supposed to be for every New Hampshire student, and that they couldn't input it, right?
Yeah, so I asked
Do you
about
need
that.
anything?
Yes,
What else?
the yes scholarship.
And it's just the updates. If you have anything you needed to update us on your report.
So I'll go out of turn and just say that no, however, what I am going to be bringing back to the New Hampshire School Administrators Association is the new homeschool law and what needs to be in place by August 31st. Whether they formally have the policy in place, this is the important part you need to know, understand, and be able to do X. I will report that out. I will also promise to report out to the special ed administrators group. Okay, so I will be taking our information back to them, just sort of share a little bit of themes from our report. And what was the other thing that we talked about a few minutes ago that I said, oh, I should, they should, oh, I
The
want to.
toolkit, the website.
Yeah, the idea of having pieces, and I always like to share these little snippets of stories about how families have had these adverse interactions, which is what leads to something like X, right? Or an office of an advocate because somebody's had bad experiences trying to get something done for their kids. So I will continue to share that messaging with everybody. I just apologize because
Thank
it's
you.
only till 6, so I want to zip there. And I'm looking forward to seeing you guys in September, because I just finished my first year of my 3-year term. Yeah. And I'm looking forward to seeing you guys on September the 3rd Friday. And you know where to find me. Just email me if you have any questions or you guys need anything. I'm around. All right. And I'm sorry I have to bolt. Yep.
It's okay. And there's a homeschool summit day in Rochester. That's an announcement. So people have,
I have a report.
oh,
Before we go into reports, I'm not clearly understanding. It sounded like there was an issue where a drop-down box didn't allow for homeschoolers to apply for a scholarship. Has that been resolved?
It has not, and I'm not clear on what the problem is. I tried to
Okay.
contact, but she's not, one of the council members, she's not here today.
Okay.
So I think this will be an ongoing issue for next time we meet.
Yeah, so if I can speak to that,
So we're gonna do
my
a
report.
date.
Yeah,
Okay.
and it's part of my report.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
yes, scholarship. So I did talk to Rihanna. So I reached out to Commissioner. I didn't know who was in charge of this. It is, her name's Rihanna. I explained the problem to her. And she said, well, yeah, all they have to do is check the yes scholarship on that drop-down menu. And that's what homeschools do. So I asked her, I said, is there some guidance document? She said there was a guidance document, which she has sent me. So this weekend, I'm going to get on using the guidance document step by step to see if it's clear, as I'm going to put my homeschool parent hat on and say, okay, I want to register my homeschool using this guidance document. Then I need to make sure that guidance document is clearly accessible on the website. So I don't know if it is or not, because I just haven't had time to get in. And so I'll run through all that, and then if I can figure it out and it's clear using the guidance document, and the guidance document is readily available.
Okay.
I just wonder, I took a quick look at it. I wonder if there should be some call outs for homeschool students in parentheses,
Maybe.
should, click this.
Sure, to make it a little more obvious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that was my first thought when I just looked at it. I started to do it, but I have to create an account. I have to do all that stuff.
Oh, okay,
So I can do this from my home email and look at my own parent.
okay.
So I will work on that, and I'll get back to Rihanna if I see there's any difficulties for, just a homeschool parent getting on there and trying to register,
Do we actually, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but that was part of old business. Have we actually heard that that has been an impediment to a student applying? And if it is, right, because we're not meeting again into September, what would be the next step for that student or family? Like, what would we advise a family that's experiencing that?
I guess we'll have to wait they can reach out to my office, I guess.
Well, in the
So,
minutes, I think it
homeschool, but-
mentioned who brought it to the HEAC council, so maybe you
Yeah.
could contact just her
Okay,
about
Yeah.
it.
Okay.
Because I would hate for a family to
Was
miss
it out on
Allison.
applying for a scholarship?
I
That's
think it's
really,
both Allison and Katie. Okay, so
Allison,
whatever you find,
Yeah.
I would contact Allison and Katie.
thank you so much.
well, I think what happens sometimes is people put these things together and they're not thinking, obviously, of all the potential permutations.
Sure.
So I always, when I build something like this, I always try to have somebody else go in. And then, okay, does this make sense? And then they can basically troubleshoot it and say, no, Tim, you did it wrong. So,
And we're all human.
oh, yeah, we are,
Right.
right? So,
So in the meantime, I can put out an announcement to my group saying, if you have any difficulties, talk to Tim.
Okay.
yeah, and what I can do is, send them to the home education office.
Yeah.
Email, and I'll just zip them up to Rihanna and say, they're having trouble with your site.
Yeah.
And hopefully I'll have a chance to at least go through it and maybe point out where she might be able to provide more clarity.
Yeah.
That's all. So,
Thank
Thank
you.
you
It's
very
easy
much.
to
A
update
little
these stuff.
smoother.
We talked about the high set, again, Commissioner was in favor of that, so I have to, I sent Sarah Wheeler an email this week. Again, she's with adult ed, and I know she's always swamped, but we'll try to see how we move that forward, and if it requires, I just don't know if it requires legislation change or rule change, or where that age is.
Sounded like it might be. rule
So that
changes.
would be obviously easier, but we wanted, so I'll double check that, and I'll work with Sarah on that. The DOE website, talked about the putting on the different pathways. He was maybe thinking, I'm gonna work with Kim Houghton, who's our web person and our PR person. And the commissioner initially was thinking maybe we just put it under, create something about compulsory attendance and say, these are the 4 or 5 ways you can meet compulsory attendance requirement.
Hmm.
But we'll work with Kim on that. So I just have to find time to meet with her. How to present that information on our webpage. And then I asked them about the FAQs. We talked about putting FAQs on the website, which is something that was on my list when I first started. And I'm just wondering the best way to do that. Do you guys want to send me
FAQs. I mean, I'm sure I can find, I've got a bunch of FAQs from the responses I've had. But I mean, I always find more value if they're actual questions.
When
From
does
parents,
this have
you know.
to be done by? It could just
They're-
be ongoing.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
I was
Oh,
thinking
yeah,
of a
we would
website we
keep
could
it,
work on
yeah.
next year as well.
Yeah. I'll probably work on some FAQs over the summer,
Yeah.
because summer is actually my light period
Okay,
with the other 3 programs I deal with. And so,
so if I get questions over the summer, I can.
yeah, if you did, and I think it'll be a live document. I think
Are
we'll
these
just keep,
basic questions, like how do I start homeschooling?
yeah, I mean, those I'm sure I can Google homeschool questions and come up with the basic ones,
Because I was
but
gonna say, Granite State Home
Yeah.
Educators, our website,
Yeah.
has an FAQ section.
Yeah.
Um,
okay. Yeah, so if you're okay with sending me those, so, or I don't know if they're copyrighted or anything, but I'd like, to have documentation of your permission to use those.
We have a website too,
yeah.
but no, I wouldn't want you just to copy the website.
Right,
What if I got it wrong, you know?
Well, exactly, yeah,
but-
well, and that's what
Yeah.
what Frank said was we would have right of, final editing
Yeah,
on
you
those
Yeah.
questions, because they would be on the department's website.
You could,
So,
you could put in the minutes that he's looking for submissions for frequently asked questions. So if anybody reads the minutes or if we report back to our organizations, they know with his contact information to send to him.
Yeah.
and He'll be barraged and.
yeah, well, and once we create it on the website, it's just a matter of updating or
Yeah,
if we get, there's so many nuanced questions, sometimes you don't want to go too deep into the weeds with
Mhm.
these,
Just
but
basic.
like I have a couple I'd like to ask you guys afterwards that are fairly nuanced. And that was all I had on my to-do list from last meeting. Those items.
Thank you.
So when kids apply to come to our learning center, we have them do a visiting day. So they can really see what it's about and see if they can align with it. And we've had about 15 students in the past couple months, and all but one have been testing at 2 grade levels behind or more.
Are they home?
Public school, 1 or 2 homeschoolers, but kind of homeschool because they,
Panic homeschooling.
yeah, because they went that route during the pandemic. So I just find it fascinating. And this was another kicker, is that one of the moms I spoke to today, she said, wow, we just got her grades and she's getting great grades. So she's getting pushed along and she's at like a 3rd grade level and she's entering 6th grade. So I just kind of highlighted to me some more areas that are just not being really looked at and really assessed for these holes that they're just getting pushed, this generation is potentially getting pushed along with all these holes in their academics.
Interesting observation. Do you have anything to say about Christian home educators since Katie's?
Don't think so.
Althea's not here. For Catholics United, we just had a graduation. We're still seeing many more members come in. So, yeah. Oh, the other thing is that we have a homeschool, I mean, it's not put on by our group, but one of the Catholic parishes is putting on a homeschool summit. So it's been many years, I think, since there's been a homeschool day in New Hampshire itself. We've had to travel out physically to Massachusetts or somewhere else. So they decided we're just gonna try something to physically put on a day. And I have some flyers here and some contact information on the back. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm registered. Thank you.
Yeah, there's contact information on the back.
Yeah,
I just
okay.
left it there so you can photocopy it if anybody wants to see it.
So I'm gonna be there, but I have probably a silly question. If somebody asks me, what does adoration available mean?
Oh, that's a fully Catholic thing.
Okay,
So that's pretty much, it has to do with the Eucharist.
so they would know, a Catholic,
A
a
Catholic,
person of Catholic faith would know what that meant.
well, I can't guarantee that.
I was like, I'm raised Catholic, I'm not quite sure I know.
Yeah, I didn't know when I was growing up either. And
Okay.
some people aren't from fully Catholic families, even if they are Catholic.
Right.
So
Okay,
you could refer them to the contact information on the back.
okay,
It's definitely Catholic,
okay. Thank you.
but there's gonna be
Oh,
tables.
to Megan, okay.
Yeah, there's gonna be tables that talk about how to homeschool. And there's a speaker that talks about, let's have encouragement for homeschooling. So, yeah. And
So is pre-registration required?
it looks like if you wanted childcare.
Oh, okay.
So if I'm going and I'm bringing a bunch of kids and I want to.
What's great is if you do pre-register, I don't know what the deadline is, but because I registered, you have the opportunity instead of bringing your own lunch to order
Yes,
a
yeah.
okay.
lunch at a very reasonable price. So I thought that was awesome.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I would highly recommend the science table.
it is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, are you gonna be there too? Oh, okay. I'm going. I don't know what I'm supposed to be
Awesome.
talking about yet, but I'm going.
Special needs.
Okay,
There are a table on special needs and what's available, what curriculum.
thank you.
So, yeah, our group is supporting and giving the information, but they're doing it.
Yeah. Nice.
So, Granite State Home Educators.
So we have seen just a silly amount of people joining our main group. And we don't know what's happening, but added over 400 people in the last 3 months. And I
Wow.
decline lots and lots of people every day for not answering the questions.
Yes, yes.
Answer the screening questions, people. So we're gonna continue to, we're expecting to see continued growth. We don't know all the reasons for that, but as Heather was saying, teachers are leaving, there's busing issues, financial difficulties, that sort of thing. So we're just seeing an enormous uptick. We're excited to see lots of used curriculum sales popping up everywhere, which is fantastic. We're getting lots of questions because a lot of folks use the same public school timeline for year-end assessments for their homeschool program as well. So year-end assessment, portfolio questions, constant. As well as lots of questions about terminating the home education program. So whether that's graduating out, but also heading back to a different educational pathway. So lots of questions about that. We do still have an issue with public school districts contacting residents to ask whether or not they're returning for the 22-23 year.
Interesting.
And this is problematic for us because they're not contacting other students who may have left for a different educational pathway. And we notify one time in New Hampshire, so I don't know why would they be contacting us? It's just that we have had some issues come up with that. Prior business. So exciting things to report. Michelle, who's our director, has been working with admissions at both Keene State College and NHTI regarding outdated requirements for admissions for homeschoolers. And Michelle has worked out and Keene has updated their policy. So basically they're requiring high set or certification of completion from either like the local school district or the state Board of Education for homeschoolers, which is not consistent with the law. So Michelle has worked really hard to get the proper information and working with the admissions counselors. So Keene State is just updated on their website. Huzzah, Michelle. NHTI has a similar issue with their current policy, and it's been 2 months that Michelle reached out and they acknowledged but have not updated their website yet. So we're going to be following up with that in hopes to resolve it. We already talked about the HEAC. So the KaiPod learning, again, this is another one of those confusing educational innovation options that people just don't understand. I personally don't understand fully. So trying to relay the appropriate, correct information to families that are interested. And so we're sending them directly to the organization, to their website, to their brochure. But because it's being offered through the Connecting Bright Futures program and uses ESSER funds in a contract. So it's for up to 40 students and up to 4 pods. It's a pilot program. So we're getting questions from VLAX families as to the requirements for this. And so Michelle did an interview with a representative from the organization, and all that information with the questions and answers is on our blog, on our website. And since homeschoolers are the target market for this program, it's important to note that KaiPod is not an education provider. And so they've made very clear that they're not providing the education, they're there as a support. And as usual, our concern is that this might open the door for confusion for traditional homeschoolers. So again, KaiPod is not an education provider. It's basically providing oversight and coaching, they call it, for students who are already enrolled in a program. They don't have any additional requirements, any additional testing, assessments, that sort of thing. So it's almost kind of in the childcare more arena. So we find that interesting that taxpayer money is being used for that purpose.
Could you spell KaiPod?
It is KAIPOD.
Okay, great, thank you.
So upcoming events, we have 2 intro to homeschooling seminars this summer. 8/3 in Dover and 8/22 in Northwood. I can go to our website or Facebook page for event details. And yay, I will be here representing Granite State home educators and being a resource for special needs homeschoolers, which I'm very excited about. And I'll also be representing, well, myself, but at a curriculum sale on Saturday that's in Rochester at the Rec Center, sponsored by Anchor Christian Co-op. But I'll also be there with Granite State home educators information and able to answer questions. We're all over the place. Talk really fast. Any thoughts, questions? Yes.
I have a question about KaiPods. Again, I haven't explored it. I've seen it pop up on Facebook, and of course, what you see on Facebook is not always true. But I believe that I read that you have to be a VLAC student to be in a KaiPod. I see Michelle shaking her head no. Okay, so that is not a truth. Okay, thank you. That was my question.
Yeah,
Okay.
they said when I explicitly asked, and I listened to an interview done by their founder with a national podcaster. And so I kind of combined what the founder said with what their marketing representative told me. And they are aiming at people who use online learning. They said that very specifically in the podcast. And I think that's why some of this came out through VLAX initially. That's how this first started rolling out, as being the in-person group opportunity for those online homeschoolers using VLAX part-time. I think conceivably they could even do that for the full-time VLAX. So I see this as another one of those. It's not an education provider, so it's not a pathway like what we were seeing with Prenda, but it is, it's providing a service for families who need child supervision or socialization opportunities and those sorts of things to enrich or supplement what families might be able to do on their own. So it's its own thing, but it's not supposed to be exclusively for VLAX. But they did emphasize a lot that it was for people taking online programs. So I don't I don't know that they can't accommodate somebody who's just doing books or other sources for homeschool, but they emphasize the online learning component. So
Thank
that's,
you.
And that's all I had.
Thank you. And Mike?
Nothing to report, but I will also be reporting out rule changes to the Principal Association. Because they may not hear it from their SAU.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we've actually covered everything.
Yeah,
I didn't think we would do that.
Last week's meeting.
So. Oh, yeah, I was supposed to allow time for public comment. Michelle?
I think I've already shared everything. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you, Michelle. So, does somebody want to make a motion to adjourn?
If there's no other business, I make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, so that would be, looks like 5:37.
A second.
Okay, thank you. In favor?
Aye.
Oh my.
Emailing is not gonna work right now.
Yeah, I won't-
emailed you. I don't know if she's gonna get those.
Yeah, my phone number's right there, so everybody can. Just don't want to put it out publicly.
Right, are we still on?